The Passover night wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying, and far darker than most summaries admit. That's how this story begins. No soft music, no comforting glow, just a warning that this night belongs in the category of, please don't ignore this part. And this is where the story shifts into do not skip this part. Because the tension didn't start at midnight. It started days earlier, when warnings were already echoing across an empire that refused to listen. Egypt might still have looked powerful on the outside, but inside, it was slipping, politically, emotionally, and morally. The setting had four key players, each stretched to their limit. Egypt, the peak of ancient military power, now cracking under pressure. The enslaved Hebrews, exhausted, mistreated, and standing at the edge of endurance. Moses, beyond tired of negotiating with someone who seemed allergic to the word yes. Pharaoh, determined to lose everything just to avoid admitting he was wrong. This combination alone could have been a disaster movie. But things escalated even more, because this wasn't just stubbornness anymore. It was an entire empire running on pride and denial. If someone today watched what was happening, they'd describe it with the clearest modern comparison possible. It's like watching someone refuse professional help while the house is literally on fire. And honestly, that's exactly how it felt. Meanwhile, the Hebrew families were preparing for something strange. They had been given very specific instructions. Prepare a lamb, share a meal, mark the door, and stay inside no matter what. No late-night strolls, no just checking something, no, but it'll be quick, I promise. The message was simple. Do not step outside. The atmosphere in the city matched the instructions. The streets quieted. The usual noise disappeared. Even the air felt like it was waiting for something. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that tells you something big is coming, and you really don't want to meet it unprepared. Moses understood the gravity of the night, but even he couldn't fully predict how fast everything was about to collapse. Pharaoh still acted like nothing mattered, as if the entire situation were optional. But behind the walls, behind the politics, and behind all the denial, something enormous was approaching, something that would not pause, negotiate, or slow down for anyone. And just so no one misses the point. And this night was nothing like the cute versions you've heard. The night everyone remembers was only the final spark. The real collapse started earlier, slowly, painfully, and loudly. Long before the streets went silent, Egypt had been dragged through a spiral that would have broken any nation. And this one was no exception. First came the plagues. Not one, not two. A whole parade of disasters, each one targeting something essential: food, water, health, stability, dignity. Then came the economic crash, which honestly felt inevitable. It's hard for an empire to stay strong when half the country is in crisis mode and the other half is pretending everything is fine. Politically, things weren't any better. The atmosphere had turned into a pressure cooker with no steam valve. People were frustrated, leaders were stubborn, and Pharaoh's ego? Well, it took a direct hit and never recovered. By this point, the nation wasn't just tired, it was emotionally done. The kind of exhaustion where people stop asking, how bad can it get? Because they're afraid the universe will answer. If social media existed back then, it would have been chaos. Hashtags trending non-stop. Conspiracy threads everywhere. Unverified sources claiming to know the next disaster. Memes about frogs raining from the sky. And of course, entire comment sections arguing for no reason. As the outline demands, here's the literal humor line. If Egypt had Twitter, it would just be chaos, complaints, and fake news. But the tension wasn't about jokes. Everyone sensed this wasn't just another crisis. Something bigger was forming, something supernatural, political, and personal all at once. This wasn't simply a dramatic moment. It was the last boundary before everything snapped. And right in the middle of all this, the Hebrew families received a strange set of instructions. Prepare the house, mark the doors, stay inside, and wait. Just wait. No heroic speeches, no dramatic marches, no "we got this" energy. Only a quiet, firm directive. Stay put tonight. From the outside, it made no sense. From the inside, it was clear. This wasn't the time to ask questions. A modern comparison sums it up perfectly. It's like receiving a nationwide alert that says, "Today nobody goes outside. Do not ask why." So, while the empire spiraled and the palace pretended to be in control, households across the Hebrew community were calmly preparing for a night they didn't fully understand. The tension was building, but they followed the instructions anyway, because ignoring them wasn't really an option. And the irony? Even after everything, plagues, collapse, warnings, public embarrassment, Pharaoh still refused to break his signature habit. And Pharaoh still refuses to blink. The night finally arrived, and the city felt wrong from the very first second. Not quiet in the normal sense, quiet in the nothing is supposed to be this quiet sense. No footsteps, no conversation drifting through windows, no dogs barking, not even a candle flickering through a doorway. It was the kind of silence that makes even the walls hold their breath. This was the moment almost no summary gets right, the moment everyone simplifies because it's easier that way. But the real scene, it was far more intense, because something was moving through the city, slowly, decisively, and without hesitation. The presence that crossed those streets wasn't gentle, it wasn't poetic, it wasn't something you'd want illustrated in a children's book. It was judgment moving house by house, and the entire city felt the weight of it. If someone had been looking out a window, they wouldn't have described it as light or warmth or anything comforting. They would have described it as a night that made every instinct tell you to stay inside and stay still. And no, despite what some paintings suggest, this wasn't the kind of moment anyone would commemorate with decorations. As the outline requires, here goes the humor. It wasn't the kind of night you'd put on a Christmas card. Inside the Hebrew households, there was no celebration, no party energy, no relief, only tension. The marked doors didn't feel like victory banners, more like a lifeline everyone hoped would hold. Families stayed quiet not because they were told to, but because fear does most of the work for you. Every sound outside, every breath inside, added to the feeling that the night was balancing on a knife's edge. And in the palace, things were unraveling even faster. Power, real power, political power, the power Pharaoh lived for, collapsed in real time. No negotiation, no speech, no final display of authority. Just a sudden, undeniable realization that something far stronger had passed straight through the heart of the empire. Outside the palace, the rest of the nation understood the moment instantly. Even those who had ignored every warning, denied every sign, or laughed off every conversation, suddenly knew. Something colossal had happened, something irreversible. A modern comparison sums it up perfectly. It's like watching the entire system shut down, and you're just hoping you're not next on the list. This was the night where pride, politics, and human control all met a force they couldn't argue with. No debates, no strategies, no second chances, just the quiet, heavy realization that everything had turned. And the most unsettling part? The night wasn't even the end of the story. It was only the turning point. And the aftermath is even more shocking. Morning didn't arrive gently. It arrived like a truth no one could avoid. Egypt woke up different, quiet in a way that even the harshest nights had never produced. There was grief everywhere, not in isolated corners, but woven into every street, every doorway, every breath. The empire didn't need an official announcement to understand what had happened. Everyone already knew. Something enormous had broken overnight. The city, usually full of life, felt frozen. People stepped outside slowly as if the ground itself might give way. No one rushed, no one shouted, no one pretended nothing happened. Egypt had been shaken, and now it was standing in the aftermath, trying to absorb what the night had taken. Inside the palace, the change was even more dramatic. The ruler who had refused to bend, refused to listen, refused to acknowledge defeat, finally broke. Not with fireworks or royal speeches, but with the quiet collapse of someone who understood that the night had stripped him of the one thing he valued most. As the outline requires, the most powerful man in the world lost the one thing he tried hardest to protect: control. For the first time, Pharaoh didn't say no. He didn't bargain. He didn't posture. He didn't pretend the crisis was manageable. Instead, he issued an order that wasn't a release, it was an expulsion, a command born from panic rather than compassion. The Hebrews were not freed. They were pushed out, urgently, immediately. And again, just as the outline demands, go, now, before things get worse. There was no gratitude, no ceremony, no heroic farewell, just fear pushing the empire to finally do what it had resisted at every cost, because deep down, everyone understood that keeping them any longer meant risking even more devastation. A modern comparison captures the moment with uncomfortable accuracy. It's like a toxic company that only does the right thing when everything is already collapsing. And yet, something else was happening beneath the chaos, something the night had revealed but no one had fully grasped. The events weren't only about judgment, they weren't only about consequences, they were the beginning of something no one thought would ever become reality. Freedom. Not a theoretical freedom, not a slow, symbolic freedom, but a sudden, undeniable shift in destiny. The kind that doesn't wait for permission, the kind that rewrites the entire balance of power in a single night. As families packed what little they had and began moving, the truth settled in. The impossible had begun. A journey no one dared dream of was now happening in real time. The night had closed one era and opened another, and neither Egypt nor the Hebrews would ever return to the world that existed before it. And just when it felt like everything had reached its peak, the story quietly prepared its next turn. And this isn't even the biggest twist. The Passover night wasn't meant to comfort. It was meant to wake a nation up. That's the sentence that finally gives the night its real shape. Because if anyone expected something peaceful, symbolic, or softly inspirational, they were reading the wrong version. The night wasn't designed to soothe anyone. It was designed to flip a world that had been stuck for far too long. Once the dust settled, the pattern behind everything became obvious. None of it was random. None of it was simply dramatic storytelling. The night exposed truths that had been piling up for generations. Truths Pharaoh ignored, Egypt denied, and the Hebrews couldn't escape. Choices had weight. Every decision Pharaoh made was like stacking bricks on a tower already leaning. Eventually it had to fall, and it did, loudly. Power that never admits limits eventually collapses under its own ego. Egypt learned that lesson in real time, with the kind of clarity no one wants but everyone understands afterward. Freedom, too, rarely arrives through polite transitions. It comes through rupture, through a break so sharp it forces movement. The Hebrews didn't walk into freedom through negotiations or slow reforms. They walked because a night finally cut through centuries of immobility and said, "Move now." And change, the real kind, it almost never begins when things are comfortable. Stability keeps people in place. Predictability makes everyone stay one more year, one more season, one more day. But when everything collapses, when the night goes dark and the old structure falls apart, that's when movement starts. The Hebrews didn't choose the timing. The timing chose them. From a modern point of view, the whole night feels like one of those moments people only understand looking backward. It's like discovering that the end of an era was happening while everyone was asleep. By the time morning came, it wasn't a question anymore. The era had ended. The world had shifted. Egypt was no longer the same, and neither were the people walking away from it. The night wasn't about fear. It wasn't about destruction for the sake of destruction. It was about transition, sudden, messy, unavoidable transition. A line drawn in history where everything before it belonged to one world, and everything after belonged to another. As the Hebrews stepped forward, they weren't just leaving a country. They were leaving a system that had defined them for generations. That's why the final truth hit so hard. That night didn't just change Egypt, it changed history. And now that this story is clear, the question opens naturally. Which misunderstood Bible moment should be simplified next? Moses at the sea? Gideon? Elijah?